All right, we got this lesson 3.3. Usually I would have you do an activity, think these things through yourself, but I'm just going to throw it all on you, okay? It's one of our more simple lessons. Try not to overcomplicate it. We'll see how we do, okay? So pause right off the bat and copy what I already have written. Okay, we talked about this briefly in the last class where we saw that a positive times positive is positive. That's what you know from just all of your math so far, previous grades. Then we have negative times negative. We found that that was also positive because we're getting rid of a bunch of a bunch of groups of the same amount of negatives. I tried to model that quickly. I know it might not have sunk in for some of you, but again, the idea of getting rid of negatives is positive, or makes a positive change. All right. Then if we have positive groups of negatives, we get negatives, and negative groups of positive, we get negatives. So I'd zip through that, but eventually you'll understand that same signs are positive, and if you have different signs and you're multiplying, it's going to be negative. So let's get into some of our examples. If you have to pause to keep writing, pause. All right, but we're going to start off simple. We're going to kind of get a little more complicated as we rotate around. Okay, so, oops. There we go. All right, so we're kind of like rotating around and getting a little more difficult as we go in that direction. So first, we'll start out with just some simple examples. All right, so we'll do example number 1, 3 times negative 4. All right, you just multiply the numbers exactly like you would normally if they didn't have signs at all. So if there's parentheses and a number right next to it, so the 3 and then right parentheses, that represents that you're going to multiply, right? Whatever's on the outside of the parentheses times whatever's inside the parentheses. So that gives us 3 times 4, which is 12, and then we can simply follow our rule up here. We had a positive times a negative, and that would give us that negative, right? Right? Fairly simple, fairly simple. All right. Now, we may have to teach, I'm not sure if you saw this last year, but new symbol for multiplication. Maybe it's new to you, maybe it's not, but let's check. So if you have 2 with a dot and then negative 3, just another way to write multiplication instead of the x, because now that we're getting more into algebra with variables, we'll be using the variable x a bunch, and it gets confused with... Sorry for the interruption, but anyway, I was saying that the time symbol, right, the old x, that meant multiplication, or that still means multiplication, gets confused with the variable x. So now we use the dots, or we'll just use the parenthesis with no symbol. Just a number next to a parenthesis means multiplication. So let's solve this one. We have negative 2 and negative 3. So you can just do 2 times 3 is 6. And then refer to up top left. A negative times a negative is a positive. So that's just going to be positive 6. There you have it. All right. So that's it. Just multiply like normal and pop in the sign according to our rules. Now, it can get a little more difficult, a little more challenging. So let's do example number 3. What if we have more than 2 factors, more than 2 numbers being multiplied? So let's go 2 times negative 3 times negative 4. And hopefully you'll see patterns as you go to make it a little bit easier, but we can just do it step by step. So we'll just do this. Okay, multiply regular, you get 6, and then use our rule. Positive times negative is negative, and bring down the other one. Then we go from there. We simplify those. And we do 6 times 4 is 24. Use our rule. Negative times negative is positive, so it's going to be positive 24. All right, awesome. So now let's ramp up the difficulty a little bit. Excuse me. We will now look at some of those problems that involve the variables. So evaluate. Right, the evaluating problems, and then we'll try some of those. Then we'll go down to an evaluation problem which includes what am I saying? Includes exponents. So we're going to see how exponents handle the negatives and the different integers. All right, so let's get after it. Here we go. So we're going to evaluate the expressions if x equals -2 and y equals negative, let's just make y equal 4. All right, so then example 1 would be, what if you just have x, y? All right, now you might not know this, but when two variables are next to each other with no symbol in between, it means multiplication. So when we do our little goose method here, we're going to put the parentheses in, right? So see how those parentheses right there are just butted up right next to each other, back to back there? That means that whatever's in the parentheses, we're going to be multiplying it by the other set of parentheses, whatever's in those other set of parentheses. So we're going to replace the x with n -2. We're going to replace the y with 4. And this just simply means -2 times 4. So we do the 2 times 4, we get 8. And we use our rule from the top left of our paper here. A negative times a positive is a negative, right? Different signs is going to be negative. So okay, so maybe it wasn't that much more difficult as we progress around our paper, but we're going to get there. Okay, so let's try one. Maybe let's do, let's go 2xy. All right, so when a number is next to a variable, no symbol in between, that's again indicating multiplication. To put our parentheses for the x and the y, we have -2 for x and 4 for y again. We can simply do these in order. Also, multiplication is commutative, so you could do it out of order, any order you want, but the idea is to do a pair at a time. So 2 times -2, you can just do 2 times 2, which is 4, but a positive times a negative is a negative. Now we're going to bring down that other 4 that we haven't dealt with yet. And we know that when a number is next to parentheses like that, right there, that means to multiply the outer number by the inner number, and we get 4 times 4, which is 16, and we use our rule, negative times a positive is a negative, so our final result is -16. All right, now to amp it up maybe just a little bit. Okay, and this is where I know a lot of people don't like to replace those variables with parentheses. But this is why, this is one of the big reasons why we do it. So let's say I say -3 x squared y. So now we're going to evaluate this. How do we deal with that square? All right. Well, we're going to follow our goose method here. We're going to have -3. Okay, now the x, right, we're going to put those parentheses there, but that little exponent is actually going to go on the outside, okay? Because we're only, we're replacing x, and the 2 is acting on the x, is operating on the x, all right? So that 2 goes on the outside, and then hopefully that helps once I explain it. And then the y is still, the y is at the end. Y is 4, x is -2, okay? Now, according to order of operations, what are we supposed to do first? Multiplication or exponents? All right, so if you remember PEMDAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, the E comes before the M, so exponents are going to be taken care of first. So what do you think the answer is going to be if I do -2 to the second power? Okay, well, let's think. Okay, what does -2 to the second power mean? What does to the second power mean? All right, it means use this number, right? Use that number, the -2, use it twice in a multiplication problem, or use it twice as a factor. Okay, so what it really means is that you're going to use that number 2 times. So -2 times -2. All right, so some of you might have thought, oh, it's a negative and a positive, so it's going to be negative. But what does it really mean when we take an exponent? It means that we are doing -2 twice. or negative 2 times negative 2. And that would be 2 times 2 is 4, and then a negative times a negative is a positive. All right, so we're going to replace this, right? What's equivalent to negative 2 to the second? We can replace that with 4, positive 4. All right, positive 4, and I'm just going to put a dot in here to make sure, remembering that I'm multiplying that by a negative 3, and I'm going to bring down my 4 here. Now I can put in parentheses or I can put my dot. I just have to show that I'm multiplying by that number. All right, and that was the hard part. Now we can just simplify accordingly. So let's do that. Negative 3 times 4 is going to be 12, and it's a negative times a positive, so that's negative. Bring down the 4. And we have 12 times 4, which is 48. Negative times positive is negative. All right? So hopefully that helped you out with how to deal with the exponents. Watch it again if you're concerned that you might not know, but we'll get some practice, and hopefully we won't have too much trouble with that. All right? So let's see, we have into this next corner here where we are going to really take it up a notch. All right, let's evaluate if x equals negative 2, y equals negative 3, and z, careful, z's can look like 2's, so just make sure you write them carefully or else they'll really confusing. All right, z equals 4. All right, so here we go. Let's do example 1 in this little corner here. Let's go 2x y squared z. Oh, I might have written a little too big to be able to fit all this, so I'm going to write smaller. 2x y squared z. So then we're going to follow our procedure here where we put our parentheses. All right, just the y is to the second. It's not like, you know, the x and y is to the second. Okay, just that y is to the second. And so we're going to plug in the x, which is negative 2. We're going to plug in the y, which is negative 3. And we're going to plug in the z, which is 4. All right, I'd like you to try this one. Okay, try this one all the way yourself. Pause, do it yourself, and then see if you were able to do it. Okay? And then unpause, and you can follow along with me and see if you made any mistakes and you have to correct anything. Okay? So seriously, pause, try it, and then come back to it. All right? So here we go. We have order of operations says to do exponents before multiplication. So I'm going to start with this guy here, and I know that negative 3 to the second really means negative 3 times negative 3. Okay, and that's going to give me 3 times 3 is 9. A negative times a negative is a positive, so that gives me 9. All right, I know that I'm going to do that times the negative 2 times the 9 times the 4. You can put in parentheses or put the dots or do both, doesn't matter. All right, now I got rid of that exponent, so I can just multiply in any order I really want. So I don't see any reason why we should do too much out of order, so I'm just going to do, well, I don't know, just for fun, I'll do these first because multiplying by 2 tends to be easier. Okay, so we have 9 times 4, which is 36, times negative 2 times 2. Bring those down. Okay, I can multiply. Why don't I just do these two since they're both positive? I know I'm going to get a positive. So that's going to be 72, and I still have the negative 2. Now you could do it differently, right? You can do it any order, just the result is what matters. So now I'm multiplying by 2 again. Remember, we just multiply them as if they're absolute values, basically, as if they're positive, and then we can bring in the rules for our negatives and positives later. Okay, so then I'm just doing 2 times 72, which is 144, and then I have a positive times a negative, so I'm going to go negative. Now there's a lot of ways, a lot of little mistakes you could make. You could turn a dot into a negative and think it's a negative. You could forget a negative as you come down. Just take your time and do your best, and I'm sure you'll progress really well with a bit of practice. Okay, that is basically the lesson. All right, I'm going to assign some work to take care of for Friday. All right, so make sure you have this copied down and put it in your notebook, and then we'll discuss the assignments when I come back, and I'll check your vocab and all that. But hopefully that was helpful, and good luck.